2025. What did you like about the All Blacks in 2024, and what did you not like about the All Blacks in 2024? Let me know in the comments. Okay. G'day everyone and welcome to Inside Rugby with Mark. If you haven't been here before, my name is Mark. I'm a retired Kiwi bloke. I'm a huge rugby fan and I live here in beautiful Cancun, Mexico. Okay, in this video I'm going to talk about the season that was for the New Zealand All Blacks. Yes, 2024 under their new leadership of Scott Robertson. And many of you have got your thoughts and opinions about how Scott Robertson has been as far as his first year in coaching the New Zealand All Blacks. So please make sure you leave those in the comments of this video. Now, what I thought I'd do in this video is go all the way back to the All Blacks' first game against England back in July in New Zealand, if you can remember that one. It was a very close game. The All Blacks won that opener by 16 points to 15. I want to have a look at the team that played that day against the English. And then we're going to fast forward to the French game that was played just 2 weeks ago at the Stade de France in Paris. So I'm going to look at the team that Razor put out against the French in Paris. We're going to do a comparison basically on the team that started the year for the All Blacks and where it ended up at the end of the year. Okay, let's start off by looking at the All Blacks season in total. They played 14 test matches this year. They won 10 of them and they lost 4 of them. Not too sure how many you predicted they would lose at the beginning of the season, but let me know how you went in the comments when it came to your predictions of the All Blacks win-loss record this year. Now, those 4 losses include a game against Argentina in New Zealand, when Argentina ran New Zealand down in the second half and got that one by 8 points. And then they lost 2 relatively close games to South Africa in South Africa. A couple of tries here and there could have changed those results. And then the last game they lost was, of course, that big game against France in Paris by 1 point. 30 points to 29, the All Blacks went down to France. Now, I think what the season shows us from the All Blacks is that the top of world rugby has become very, very cramped indeed. And on any given day, a point here, a point there could have made a lot of difference to some of the results for the All Blacks this year. And I talk about, of course, the first game against England and New Zealand. It was a 1-pointer in favour of the All Blacks on this occasion by 16 points to 15. And then we have that thrilling game in Australia where the Australian Wallabies came back in the second half and put a big scare into the New Zealand All Blacks. And many of us were thinking that if there was another 5 minutes in that game, Australia probably would have stolen it. New Zealand coming out on top by 31 points to 28 in the end. That was a close one that could have gone either way in the end. And then, of course, that tight game against England. England should have won that. They had 2 opportunities in the last couple of minutes to close out that game. They weren't able to do that, so the All Blacks got away with another one. So I guess, okay, so let's look at the 2 teams that I'm going to do an assessment on here. The team that started the year for the All Blacks under Razor and the team that essentially played in the last big game for the All Blacks, and I'm talking about the game against France. So in the front row for the All Blacks at the beginning of this campaign, we saw De Groot, Taylor and Lomax. And then against France, we saw the front row being Williams, Taylor and Lomax. So as far as the forwards go, Jason Ryan and Scott Robertson were pretty consistent with that front row throughout the year. It was only a naughty boy corner experience from De Groot that saw him miss a couple of games. And we saw Taimati Williams come in and play some huge rugby during the year, and for me he was one of the standout All Blacks, no doubt about it, in the 2024 season. So compared from the England game to the France game, we had a pretty similar front row with Taylor and Lomax being the 2 in there that survived from the beginning of the year, and Taimati Williams was rewarded in addition to Ethan de Groot's naughty boy behaviour, keeping him probably off the field at that stage. And then the locks at the beginning of the year, well, we saw Scott Barrett and Patrick Tuipulotu. Tuipulotu had come off a great Super Rugby season and had been given the nod for the All Blacks starting position. We all found out that Scott Barrett was going to be the captain of the New Zealand All Blacks. A lot of you disagreed with that. And when we start talking about the France game at the end of the year, I'd like to hear your assessments on what you thought about Scott Barrett as the New Zealand All Blacks captain for this season. Of course, in the last game against Italy, he got another yellow card and was sent from the field. So fast forwarding to the game against France, and we saw Scott Barrett in the locking position along with Tupou Vai, and I thought Tupou Vai had a great season this year. Yes, he had a couple of games where he wasn't completely on point, but for the rest of it, I think the loyalty showing to Tupou Vai was very good. He was definitely one of our best, I think, as far as locks go. And I know some of you has said that it would be better for him to come off the bench, and we see Patrick Tuipulotu starting for the All Blacks. So that's something we'll need to watch out for in 2025, whether or not that happens. But to close out the season in that tough game against France, we did see Scott Barrett and Tupou Vai going up against some very good locks in France in Flamand and Merfu, and that was a mighty competition indeed. Now, the back three in the forwards was always going to be an interesting predicament in 2024 for the New Zealand All Blacks. There seemed to be a lot of loosies in potential contention. I remember back at the beginning of the season, a lot of people saying, give Peter Lakai a go, throw him in there. And then you had the fans of Ethan Blackadder and Dalton Papali'i along with Sapeni Finau. So there was a lot of options available to Scott Razor Robertson as the beginning of his campaign took off against England in that first game. And he decided to go with Finau, Papali'i and Ardie Savea. And that's the way the All Black season would start off. And there was going to be a lot of changes and a lot of different things happen in the loosies for the All Blacks throughout the year. Now, if we look at the selections of that game against France in the loosies, we saw Finau starting the game again. We saw Ardie Savea move to number 7, and we saw Wallace Satiti in at number 8. And of course, throughout the year, we saw the breakout season of Wallace Satiti. And for me, probably the rookie player of the year for the All Blacks this year. No doubt about it, he was absolutely brilliant in pretty much all of the games that he played in. And in that particular game against France, we saw him going in at number 8. That was until Finau, of course, got injured early on. Of course, we saw Finau go off in that game very early on, and we saw Peter Lakai come on for the All Blacks, and I thought he did really, really well in that game. He was tough, he did some good runs, and he was good in the clearances as well. And that was a very, very tough game for Peter Lakai to come on with, so he had very good experience. But we've also seen Sam Cane, haven't we, throughout the year, and it looks like Razor Robertson had been using up the best of Sam Cane throughout 2024. I had no problem with this. I thought Sam Cane has been playing brilliant rugby throughout the year, and whilst I'm a big supporter of bringing the young guys through, I think particularly on the Northern Tour, it was important for the All Blacks to have the experience of Sam Cane in the loose forwards on that particular tour. So I think that worked out quite well for the All Blacks this year. But there's no doubt in my mind it's time for change to move on now in 2025, and I'd like to see this plethora of loose forwards really be given a go in 2025 so we can find out who is the best of this bunch. So in 2025 it's going to be really interesting. I'd like to hear your views on this one. How do you think Razor's going to play it in the loose forwards for the All Blacks? Are we going to finally see Wallace Satiti at number 8 and see Ardie Savea move to number 7? Or are we going to see the loosies jinked around a little bit more and the likes of Jacobson come back in, Ethan Blackadder perhaps get another go, or is Dalton Papali'i still in the mix? And where does Peter Lakai fit into this? We saw him play, I thought, a really good game against France. So really, compared to the beginning of the season in that game against England, we saw the likes of Tamaiti Williams being given more opportunity in the forwards. We saw the breakout season of Wallace Satiti, of course. And we also saw Sam Cane getting more and more play in there as well, probably because of the injuries to Blackadder, Papali'i and Luke Jacobson, who didn't end up being available for that end of year tour to the UK, Europe and Ireland. Now, in terms of the locks for the All Blacks, it seems as though Robertson is settled on Scott Barrett and Tupou Vai with Patrick Tuipulotu there, and probably those ones rotating off the bench. Really interested to know everybody's views on Scott Barrett as the captain of the All Blacks this year. Okay, so those were the forwards and how we saw the transition of those forwards between the England game up until when we played France. Now let's have a look at the backline and see what the evolution of the All Blacks backline. Okay, to start the year off in New Zealand at halfback, we saw TJ Perenara get the nod. And then in the number 10 jersey, we saw the commencement of the Damian McKenzie experiment under Razor Robertson and the loyalty that he would show to McKenzie throughout the beginning of the season. And then moving outside, we saw starting the season in the 12 jersey, Geordie Barrett. We saw Rieko Ioane starting in jersey 13. And on the wings, we would see Mark Talia and Sevu Reece. And we would see Stephen Perifetta at fullback. So that was the All Black backline that started the year, and we were able to assess whether or not this was going to be an attacking backline, whether they were going to be able to handle pressure in key moments of big games. And we started to see how that unfolded pretty quickly. So by the time we got to the French game, there'd been a number of changes in the New Zealand backline, particularly with combinations, more so than bringing in new people. And if you've been watching my videos throughout the year, you'll know that I have been one calling for lots of different experimentation going on in the New Zealand backline that we just didn't see from Razor Robertson, because he wanted to show loyalty to these particular players that he'd got in his group, and he did that throughout the season. So coming into that game against France, the changes that we saw, well, let's start off at number 9, and it was Cam Roigard that came in to play that game. And of course, since Roigard came back from his bad injury, we saw him, I think, improving in every game. And by the end of the season, I think it's fair to say that Roigard has put his hand up to be our number 1 starting halfback for the All Blacks, and played very, very well in the last couple of games in the black jersey. Now the rest of the backline for that game against France, we saw Beauden Barrett starting at number 10. We saw Geordie Barrett at 12. We saw Rieko Ioane at 13. Does this all sound pretty familiar to you? Yes, well, it was throughout the year. Caleb Clark had got to own the 11 jersey by the time we got into this particular game. And we saw Sevu Reece. Yes, he started that game against England way back in July, and now here he was running out against France at the end of the year. And at fullback, we saw Will Jordan, who'd been moved off the wing into the fullback position. So those were the changes that had happened between the England game at the beginning of the year and where we ended up against France in our second to last game of the season. So what are my thoughts around this New Zealand backline over the course of 2024, and have we seen any real true evolution? And what are the things that have stuck out to be rather problematic from my point of view? Well, first of all, Roigard, like Satiti in the forwards, has been a shining light for the New Zealand backline, and he's going to be fantastic, I believe, in 2025 in really getting this New Zealand team going forward. And we saw in those games against Italy and France how those sniping runs of his can be extremely dangerous against the defensive line. So Roigard has to be the starting halfback, in my opinion, for the All Blacks next year. Now, number 10 has been problematic all year long. I haven't been a supporter of the Damian McKenzie experiment at number 10, and I've been very pleased to see in most recent games that Robertson has decided to put McKenzie on the bench, use him as an impact player, and we've seen, in my opinion, far more impact from Damian McKenzie when he's under less pressure of starting a game in the 10 jersey, and he can come on feeling free and light and able to use his skill sets against a tiring defence. I think that's the perfect position to use Damian McKenzie in this All Black team. Now, throughout the year, I've kept my eye on the All Blacks in terms of a squad that's building and changing through transition to get to the Rugby World Cup in 2027 in Australia. And for me, Beauden Barrett is not the guy that I would be promoting in that number 10 jersey. Yes, he played a couple of okay games at number 10 for the All Blacks and didn't do anything terribly wrong. But at the same time, like Rassie has been doing with South Africa, New Zealand has a shortage of number 10s in that position, and we're not giving new guys the opportunities to get the experience. And that's where I was disappointed with Robertson throughout 2024 in that number 10 jersey. We just didn't see other options being given quality time against quality opposition. And there's all these people that say, well, you can't throw a young guy in against South Africa or against Ireland. Well, I disagree. And if you look at what Rassie's done this year, playing over 50 players in his squad, he wants them all to get experience against the best rugby teams in the world. And that's the only way to find out whether or not these guys have got the mettle. And if you look at guys like Mani Lebok and look at Sasha Feinberg and Ngoma Zulu, it makes or breaks these guys by putting them in the limelight and under the pressure. And I thought Ngoma Zulu did very well against the All Blacks in South Africa this year, and it was the right move from Rassie. We haven't seen that from Scott Robertson, and as a result of that, we've got just Beauden Barrett and Damien McKenzie to fill the 10 position. And when one of them gets injured, like we saw with Beauden Barrett, it leaves New Zealand in a very, very big hole. And I think this is something that Robertson needs to address in 2025. Now, we've seen recently Harry Plummer pull the plug on New Zealand Rugby. He's off to France, and you can't blame the guy for chasing some money and looking after his family, and probably knowing based on this year's performances that he's not going to be given a chance in the New Zealand All Black. Now, many of you have been saying that Robertson is waiting for Richie Mo'unga to come back to New Zealand next year and to be putting him straight back into the All Blacks team. Well, I have an issue with that as well, because I don't think that's building towards the future as we should be doing. I think the All Blacks need to be looking at a new young crop of number 10s and be giving them the opportunity. What's wrong with putting Stephen Perifetta in there for a few games and seeing how he goes against world-class competition? What's wrong with trying Ruben Love at number 10 and seeing whether he stacks up? He's openly said that he wants to be a number 10 throughout his career. So these are the guys that I would be giving a chance, and I'm sure there's others within the New Zealand rugby system today that should be given a chance to build that depth within the number 10 position. Let me know your thoughts on this one. As you can tell, I'm pretty passionate about it, and I want to see where this goes in 2025, but I think it's an area where Scott Robertson didn't perform well this year by giving more 10s the opportunity for the All Blacks. And then moving on to my two favourite positions, number 12 and 13. Well, as you could see by the list of players I read out, Jordie Barrett and Rieko Ioane, they started the season against England in that first test, and they ended the season against France in that big game at the Stade de France. And as you can tell throughout my videos this year, I've been very unhappy with the attacking capabilities of both of those players. Yes, I acknowledge that on occasions we've seen great defensive performances from both of them. Just don't have the attacking creativity and power that we need into that 12 and 13 position. If we look at the likes of Bundy Aki, Damien Diolandi and Jesse Creel, Sione Tuipulotu for Scotland, even Len Ekitau for Australia, all these guys are breaking the line and setting up great attacking opportunities for their backlines. And Jordie Barrett and Rieko Ioane, for me, throughout the entire season in 2024, were very much lacking in this area. Now, a lot of you have agreed with me that Rieko Ioane, if he's going to be in this All Black team, maybe he's better off on the wing, and I would tend to agree with that. I think when he's running on those outside channels, he's got pace to burn and he can beat defenders. We've seen it before when he used to play on the wing for the All Blacks. The other thing is, we've seen Caleb Clark come into this All Black team this year and really own that number 11 jersey, and I don't think there needs to be anybody playing around with that jersey. It's Caleb Clark's while he's performing at this particular level. But the other issue I had throughout the year was Will Jordan going to fullback, and I can tell you all now that throughout the 2024 season, Will Jordan scored the least number of tries in an All Black jersey since this change has been made, compared to when he used to be on the wing. So I think we've really got to ask ourselves a couple of questions here. If we had a better performing attacking 12 and 13 in the All Blacks and Will Jordan on the wing, would we go back to the days where Jordan was scoring regular tries for the All Blacks on the wing? And can we not afford to have Jordan scoring a lot of tries for the New Zealand All Blacks? That's not always going to be the case, as we've seen with him playing at fullback. And I think we have other fullback options the All Blacks need to be exploring for this particular team. Now, ironically, we saw Sevu Reece play in that first game against England. We saw him picked in the game against France as well. I haven't been a fan of Sevu Reece this year. I think he's really let himself down. He's underperformed in that jersey on the wing, and New Zealand needs to look at other options. Mark Talia, on the other hand, had a couple of good games. He's much better when he sticks to his outside channels, and a lot of this has to do with the kind of performance we see from the 12 and 13 again, and the lines that they're running to be able to support the wingers. So I think some of the winger issues for the All Blacks this year have come from, again, Rieko Ioane and Jordie Barrett inside, with the way that they've been running their attacking lines and setting up their wingers. We saw a very good performance from Mark Talia when he was able to be outside his man, running the outside channels and trying to beat the man down the line, and that's where Mark Talia is the best, not when he's doing these snaking runs back into the forwards and confusing the All Black attacking patterns. So that's something that I think the All Blacks really need to look at, is what are they going to do with 12 and 13, and I think we need to try some new people in those positions. Now, a few of you asked me, okay, well, who would go into the 12 and 13? Well, I am a guy that thinks outside the box, and I don't like what we've already tried. Anton Lienert-Brown, for me, has been another failure. He hasn't done anything to ignite the rugby fields of the world in an All Black jersey in the last 12 months, and while he can be good in a defensive pattern, once again, we haven't seen the attacking prowess that we need. And if we remember back to the days of the Ma Nonus and the Conrad Smiths of the world, this is when the All Black backline was really firing, and we're just simply not seeing that these days. As far as David Havilli goes, well, I don't know why he was on the Northern Tour. I think he might have had a bit of a sabbatical paid by the New Zealand Rugby Union, and for me it was a bit of a joke even having him in this squad, because I don't see him as being one of the men that can fill this role as well. Now, I put forward that Caleb Clark should be given a go at number 12. I think he would be awesome in that position, given some time to grow into the position in 2025. And I even threw it out there, Asafa Amua would be fantastic at number 12 for the All Blacks. Now, if you look at my video I did on this, I share the point that Amua used to be a number 12 for Marist High School when he played his schoolboys rugby. He's very good on his feet. He's got very good hand and execution skills as well. And he's a big boy, only a couple of kilos heavier than Bundy Aki. So when it comes to body type and body weight, Amua has got exactly the kind of combinations that we need in that number 12 position. So I think we need to see some creativity. That's basically what I'm saying when it comes to number 12 and 13. Billy Proctor, of course, he went home to be with his wife, quite rightly so, to give birth to their first child through the Northern Tour. But again, we didn't see enough of Billy Proctor throughout the 2024 season for me in giving him the ability to grow into that 13 jersey. But also another problem with having Proctor in the team, he's got to have the right number 12 in there as well to be able to showcase his true talent. And for me, throughout the season, we simply didn't see it. If you go back to the game in San Diego that the All Blacks played against Fiji, Anton Lienert-Brown had his best game of the season, and so did Billy Proctor because of that. And we saw Billy Proctor score a great try in that game, and he was very good across the field. But we didn't see that enough from Anton Lienert-Brown, and I think that's where he lets down his credentials for this All Blacks team. The consistency at that high level when he's really on the edge of his game playing extremely well, it's simply not there as far as I'm concerned. So for me, we didn't see enough experimentation in the backline for the All Blacks throughout 2024. It's as simple as that. We got stuck into this belief of Geordie Barrett and Rieko Ioane at 12 and 13. We kept trying Mark Talia and Sevu Reece on the wings, and we moved Will Jordan away from his really good try-scoring capabilities as the number 14 on the wing for the All Blacks. We had a win with Cam Roigard coming in at number 9. We also had another win by putting Damien McKenzie on the bench. It took far too long for us to get to that conclusion as far as I'm concerned, and we still haven't looked at replacements for Beauden Barrett when it comes to that number 10 jersey and building depth as we head towards the 2027 Rugby World Cup. So I'm hoping in all hopes that in 2025 we see more changes in the New Zealand backline, and if we are going to be competitive at the world level, beating some of these top teams, imagine if we had Ma Nonu, Conrad Smith playing against France in that last 20 minutes of that game. I think the outcome of that game would have been very different, because those are two players that can break open the line and score opportunities for this New Zealand All Black team. Okay, so let's talk about the evolution of the All Blacks bench over the course of 2024, and a very important part of the game these days. Of course, the benchmark is South Africa with their bomb squad or nuclear squad coming on and being able to finish off games. Were the All Blacks going to be able to compete with this in 2024? Let's have a look at the bench they put out against England in that very first game back in July. In the front row that came on, we had Safu Amua, Tuanga Fasi and Fletcher Newell. And then the other two forwards we had were Tupou Vai and Luke Jacobson. And in the backs we had Finlay Christie, remember him, he used to be a halfback for the All Blacks, Anton Lienert-Brown and Beauden Barrett. So that was the starting bench at the beginning of the season. So where did we end up and how did they perform? Well, in that game against France at the Stade de France, the bench for the All Blacks was Amour, Tuangafasi and Tossi. And for me, Tossi was a big winner this year for the All Blacks. Again, another player I would have liked to seen earlier in the campaign for the All Blacks, but we got there in the end, and it was good to see his impact on the team. We saw Patrick Tuipulotu coming off the bench, which I think is the right position for him. He played very well in that game. And Peter Lakai we saw come on very early against France, didn't we? Because of that injury to Finau. And I thought Peter Lakai did very, very good in that game. And then in the backs in that game, we saw Ratama, Anton Leonard-Brown and Damien McKenzie. For me, Ratama's going to be under a bit of pressure in 2025 from Noah Hotham. I think he's going to be on the heels of Cam Roigard, and I think that interesting halfback selection process is going to come to a head next year in 2025. Anton Leonard-Brown seems to be the staple diet for Scott Robertson when it comes off the bench. And again, I've just mentioned what I think about him and what needs to be done in that position. And we ended up with Damien McKenzie there off the bench, making the impact that I think he's designed to do and plays the best at international level. So there we go. That's the evolution of the All Blacks team throughout 2024. And of course, we saw some injuries happen as well, and there was some cover from some other players. But in general, I was just trying to give you a flavour of what we started with against England in July, and when we ended up with that tough game against France at the Stade de France, which we actually lost in the end by 1 point. So over the course of the season, am I happy with the way the All Blacks evolution has gone? Yes, in some areas, but I think it's the forwards that's been carrying the All Blacks this year. I think we've seen some outstanding performances, particularly from Wallace Satiti. I thought Sam Cane had a good end-of-year performance as well. And I think we've seen great performances from the front row, in particular to Mighty Williams. Cody Taylor's had a fantastic season for the All Blacks, and Tyrell Lomax has been very, very good as well. Patrick Tuipulotu, when he comes on, he does a very, very good job, but we didn't see enough depth building when it comes to the likes of Josh Lord and Sam Dowie and these other guys. Tupou Vai, I thought, had a good season for the All Blacks. So for me, the All Blacks' performances in the forwards were pretty good this year, and on most occasions they performed at the level they're going to require to beat the best teams in the world. But a lot of work needs to be done in the backline for the All Blacks. I think it's still very unsure of what we're doing in terms of an attacking plan and being able to get that sorted out. So I think we need to see quite a few changes around experimenting in 2025. We've got to break up this Geordie Barrett and Rieko Ioane combination. It is not working on attack, and that's the thing the All Blacks need to pride themselves on, because that's the way this team is set up and this is their DNA. So with this forward pack being able to provide the kind of ball with Cam Roigard at number 9, the All Blacks outside backs needs to be a team that can crack through a defensive line. So in 2025, I want to see changes when it comes to 12 and 13. I want to see Caleb Clark possibly trialled at number 12, although he's playing very, very well at 11. And I'd really like to see Will Jordan back on the wing for the reasons I've explained throughout this particular video. I think we also have to do some work when it comes to our bench. I don't think we're quite there yet. And next year we'll probably see Noah Hotham coming off the bench with maybe Rieko Ioane and Damien McKenzie. Now for me, that could work very, very well. Let me know in the comments what you think about that combination. Okay, so wrapping it up, do I think the All Blacks had a good year? Well, for me, it was pretty... I'm not like Scott Razor Robertson. I'm not a conservative guy. I'm a guy that would go out there and try a lot of new players like Rassie did throughout 2024. That's what I would have done as well, and given a lot of players an opportunity to prove themselves and to step up. And you are going to find the likes of Cortez Ratama and Wallace Satiti and Taimati Williams. These guys are going to put their hand up naturally because they're talented and they deserve to be in that black jersey. Some other players like Harry Plummer, they may have been given more of a chance, and we might have found out that they're not the right guy for that particular position. We found out that about Damien McKenzie after so many games at number 10 starting for the All Blacks. We've now found out where he should be, in my opinion. The unfortunate thing for me, I think Scott Robertson is going to be still under pressure at the beginning of of next year. A lot of people are going to see this year as not being a successful year with those 4 losses, and as a result of that, we may continue to see this conservative approach when it comes to his selections. The other question that needs to be asked are the All Blacks playing the kind of rugby that's going to beat the best teams in the world? And I think that's another area they need to have a look at, because throughout the season, Scott Robertson talked in every single press conference about how the lack of execution cost the All Blacks the game. And I think it's fundamental that the teams need to be able to play at a very high level. But I've been saying in all my videos throughout this year, it's an incorrect expectation to think that your team is going to play at the top of their game for 80 minutes of a rugby game. It's just simply not going to happen. So when they do play well for maybe 50, 60 minutes, that's when they have to score their points, and that's where they need to be on point. And the All Blacks haven't shown that consistency to be able to do that throughout 2024. So either the level of execution goes up and those players get better, or we bring in new players that are able to play at that level of execution. And that's what happens when you bring in a Wallace Satiti and a Cam Roigard into this New Zealand team. You instinctively lift that level of potential up with athleticism, but also general ability to be able to play at a higher skill level. And that's what we saw from those players in 2024. The All Blacks are going to always have to be able to compete in the forwards, and I think our forward pack is getting closer to where it needs to be able to do that against the likes of South Africa and Ireland and France. We're not too far away from that. But our backline has a lot of holes, and that's an area that really needs to be plugged as we go into next year. So there we go. That's my summary of the All Blacks season. 10 wins, 4 losses. Very few changes when it came to the selections throughout the year in those key positions, and that's something that I want to see changed in 2025. Now, what do you want to see changed in 2025? What did you like about the All Blacks in 2024, and what did you not like about the All Blacks in 2024? Let me know in the comments. Okay, that's it. Thanks very much for watching this video. Plenty more coming here on Inside Rugby with Mark. So stick around, hit the subscribe button. Please give this video a like and a thumbs up. It helps me with the YouTube algorithms and all that sort of stuff. And I'll see you again very soon in the next episode of Inside Rugby with Mark right here on this channel. Until next time, you stay safe, stay well, keep enjoying your rugby all across the world. And it's time to say adios from beautiful Cancun in Mexico. Until next time, bye for now.